Mount up! We're coming!
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider presented by FanDuel. Matthew Coller here, and let the general manager search begin. Today, the Wilfs announced that yes, the GM search will be starting for the Minnesota Vikings, and we will read their statement in just a second. Also, I did finally get a chance to dig into some UDFAs, and I got a list there. And the Vikings signed a player, but it was not a wide receiver, so we are going to refuse. We're holding out. We are not talking about another player that the Vikings sign here on the show until it is a wide receiver. If you're not going to draft anybody, you're going to bring them in for visits and not come away signing them the next day, then we are on strike. Okay, I'm just kidding, but we will talk about the player the Vikings signed, a depth signing on defense, but we'll get into that as well. But why don't we begin with the statement from the Wilfs, and then here's the question for you for the comment section. Start loading up the comments with this. What do you want to see from the next general manager? Not necessarily names, but attributes. Or put it this way, if you could offer the next GM a little bit of advice, what would you toss his way? And what type of GM are you looking for? That's what we're going to get into a little bit later on the show. So let us begin with the Wilfs sent out this announcement today. Quote, with the conclusion of the 2026 NFL Draft, our search for the next general manager of the Minnesota Vikings is underway. This will be a thorough and deliberate process by ownership and will have support from a small internal advisory committee of senior leaders. We have also engaged the respected firm Turnkey ZRG to assist in conducting a wide-ranging search that includes experienced football executives, emerging candidates, and individuals with diverse professional backgrounds. It doesn't say not podcasters here. I'm just saying. Back to the statement. Our focus is to identify a decisive leader with a clear vision for team building, strong communication skills, and the ability to build alignment across the organization. Out of respect for all involved, we do not intend to publicly announce candidates and will provide further information when the search is complete. So I know that some of you have said, hey, can you give us a list of people that it could potentially be? But when you look at this statement, not only are they not going to tell us who it's going to be or who they're going to interview, I suspect that maybe some names will make their way out into the public, although we're down one NFL insider, but maybe a few names will leak out. So we'll see when the reports come out of this person or that person. But if they keep it totally quiet, then we won't know until we know, I guess, until maybe there's a finalist or until they have made a decision on the general manager. But it doesn't seem like the search is going to be quick. It feels like it's going to take maybe weeks here, and that they are going to look high and low, beat the bushes for every possible candidate that they could bring in. But there is also something important to mention in regards to their GM search, which is, per Tom Pelissero of NFL Network, longtime Vikings executive Rob Brzezinski, who has run the team's football operation since January, has expressed interest in the full-time GM job. That was something that we weren't really sure about. I mean, Rob has been with the team for such a long time. He's been the cap expert. I mean, executive VP of football operations, like that's a pretty good title in the NFL. But Rob, after this experience of working as the general manager, has decided to toss the hat in the ring to be the next Vikings GM. So I want to start there with the show of just like, let's break down what we think of that idea and then get into what we think that would be good for the next GM if they decide not to go with Rob, what ideas you'd share, what advice you would give the Wilfs. I was not invited to the committee. They said that it's a small committee. And once again, no podcasters have been invited to the committee, but I'm available. I've covered the Vikings for 10 years here, seen the GM succeed and fail. I don't know. If you want my help, I'm here. Anyway, I'm mostly kidding. And I'll get to those UDFAs later, but I want to talk a lot about the GM search here. So let's just begin with the Rob Brzezinski part, because I think that this is easier than what we want from our imaginary candidate for Vikings GM. With Rob Brzezinski, here's the way it would feel to me if the Vikings went with Rob. It would feel very secure. It would feel like this is someone who 100% knows how to do this job. He is incredibly experienced. He is professional. He is respected. He has relationships across the NFL. And even we heard from one of the Vikings' longtime scouts on draft day who talked about this being the most fun that he had along the way, for whatever that, is worth. But the responses to the way that Rob handled things internally through the NFL draft. And I just implore you to not project your own take on the draft as being evidence he shouldn't be the GM. Like, if you didn't like the draft, that's not a reason for him to not be the GM, because we don't know how it's going to play out. And I think we could also very clearly see from the draft picks that they were driven by the coach's belief in the fits for the players. So again, we're going to see how that plays out over a number of years. We certainly know better than to judge a draft right away. It's really more about the operation of this entire time through from January all the way to the end of the draft. And I think what you could say for Rob is that he really did a good job of setting up the Minnesota Vikings franchise, whether he gets the GM or job or not, to be in better shape than it probably would have been if Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah was running it. I think because, Kwesi had created this time horizon for 25 and 26, and the chips were getting pushed into the middle of the table last year. And what Rob was able to do was kind of tidy up some of the mess that was made of the salary cap and make it look for the future a heck of a lot better than it looked going into this offseason. And he did it by not allowing them. I'm sure that there was some push inside the building to, hey, let's restructure all these contracts. Hey, let's go out and get this free agent and put 50 million void years on it. And, whatever it might be, I'm sure there was some thought of doing that in free agency. And what he was able to do is sort of say, all right, let's redo this deal, redo that deal, restructure Justin Jefferson, set up TJ Hawkinson to be a free agent for next year, bring back Aaron Jones on a very cheap contract, keep the band together and not sacrifice the future for this one last piece here or this one last piece there. And while that created not really the most exciting free agency, I think that a lot of us would agree that it was a better way to go about it. Were they overpaid defensive tackle or something away from, Super Bowl contention? Like, I don't know. Like, maybe as we get throughout the season, we'll see that. But then more of the picture becomes clear when they trade Jonathan Grenard to get the salary cap right for the future. $22 million opens up next year. So maybe there's moves to be made in June or whatever, after they get some more cap space from the Jonathan Allen contract with him going to Cincinnati. So a lot of things set up well for the future. And then even with the draft, whether you like it or not, you have to look at each one of these players and go, yeah, that might not necessarily be for right now. I mean, we could see Dominique Orange making an impact right now, but Jake Olday, that's probably for the future. Caleb Banks is definitely a guy who's going to have to develop quite a bit before he's ready to play 500 plus snaps effectively in the NFL. And, the guys in the later rounds, someone like Chuck Demings that's a project. That's someone who's super athletic and there's a lot to like about his personality, but he's going to need development in order to get there. I could see for sure Max Bredesen and Damon Claiborne having an impact right away. But for the most part, a lot of the draft capital was spent with ideas on depth right now and into the future later, that while they did take a big swing in the draft, they did not scramble to try to fill a spot just to fill a spot. They did go for a position they needed, but they went for trying to swing for the David Ortiz fences, which you can debate whether you like that or not, or whether that's too risky for you. It's a little risky for me, but in terms of the operation, it felt like this was Rob Brzezinski setting the board and the coaches liking the fits, and that's the way they did it. So if you hire Rob Brzezinski to be the general manager, your operation is going to, I think, cease to be dramatic. I mean, this has been dramatic for quite a while now, with Rick Spielman and Mike Zimmer and their fallout, and then things behind the scenes with Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, where there were rumors for several years that things weren't quite aligning in the front office. I don't think that you would have that problem with Rob Brzezinski. Where his superpower exists is managing the books. And while we would love every single general manager to be some sort of super scout, that's usually not the case. Usually, while they may come from the scouting world, they're not sitting in their office 24/7 alone watching the film and then walking out and saying, folks, I've discovered the next great prospect. That's actually not at all how the general manager job works. It is much more manager than you think. And I think Rob, with his experience and with his personality, I think that he is an excellent manager of people, and that he is a guy that could get everybody on the same page. And you see in that statement, it even continues to mention something that the Wilfs have considered very valuable, which is getting everybody involved, finding consensus within the building, and having the coaches feel like their voices are heard, having the scouting department feel like they're involved, sending different, position coaches to meet with Caleb Banks, their D-line coach, Ryan Nielsen, going down and spending time with the guy who ends up being the first round draft pick. It was a collaborative effort, which you and I might say, hey man, maybe the GM should just pick his favorite guy. But we know that the Wilf ownership wants that. And I have no doubt in my mind that Rob Brzezinski can keep all trains on the tracks, can keep collaboration being the main thing, and having a real, I think, separation between the front office part, economics, and the football part, meaning Rob's strength is that. And his strength is being able to say, look, guys, trading Jonathan Grenard is actually a good idea. And here's why. Because if we sign him, then this, and we could get this back, plus this amount of cash, plus this in free agency, et cetera, et cetera. Like, that's where Rob Brzezinski is very strong. Where Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores are very strong, and, the coaching staff and so forth, is in the player evaluation, in the fit. How's this guy going to work in our offense or our defense? What skills does he have? That sort of thing. And then those two sides come together to form a front office and coaching relationship. I think it would be a steady and solid relationship between those two sides. And the coaches would probably it would be like a make the grocery list, go to the grocery store type of situation where here's what the coaches want. The front office is going to try to acquire it. And that's how it ends up working. I think that is something that could be perfectly fine for the Vikings. And they have flown steady for a while as a franchise, despite even some rockiness there. They have not had a truly bad record since, I don't know, was it 2013? Every other year. Yeah, right. That's the only season under 7 wins. So every single year, they're at least at this baseline. And I think that they stay at that baseline with Rob Brzezinski. And I think that they probably get to a point where if things go right, then they're going to have a chance to legitimately compete. And I really mean at the quarterback position, because so many people's jobs just rest on that quarterback position. But I think Brzezinski, in collaboration with the coaching staff, would have a harmonious relationship to build solid quality rosters that, should they have great quarterback play, they're going to be there in the mix. That's the case for Rob Brzezinski. Now, there's a little bit though in my mind, and it's not a disrespect to Rob at all because he's incredibly deserving for this position, but I can't help think about what might be behind door number 2. Now, if you say, well, door number 2 could be Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah, I would also say, well, I mean, it's not like that was a horror show. They did have 13 and 14 win seasons with him as the GM, but I don't just mean like a data person who is not been around very long, which was the case for Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. Like he came from a different background. They wanted a hire that was completely different than the old scout and Rick Spielman. But I guess what I wonder is, are there people who can kind of split the difference? Not somebody who is completely inexperienced at leading a front office and may not have even known enough people in the league to build his own front office. But the idea would be that you've done things a certain way, even when Kwesi was here for so long. Do you want a czar who is going to come in and revamp your front office entirely, and who is going to bring different ideas, who is going to try to put you in a different echelon? Maybe that works and maybe that doesn't. We've seen it in town, right? In Minnesota, where sometimes you go out and get the smartest guy in the room and it works. That might be Tim Connolly with the Wolves, or sometimes you get the smartest guy in the room and it does not work, like Derek Falvey and the Minnesota Twins. So it's always just like a draft pick. It's always hard to say, but maybe thinking about someone rooted in some of the teams that consistently seem to be one step ahead. I think we would all agree that the Philadelphia Eagles, the Los Angeles Rams, the Seattle Seahawks, now, they're the Super Bowl champs. But even then, for years, John Schneider and the way that he ran his front office was successful. But the Rams and the Eagles are the two teams, and maybe toss the 49ers a little bit in there, although you might just argue they have the best coach in the NFL. That's possible. But I would say when you assess front offices, the Eagles kind of set the standard in the NFL, and the Rams are not too far behind. Are you maybe apt to prefer someone who comes from a background with those teams that could bring you a different set of ideas? And rather than staying the course, which has gotten them so far and a lot of successful seasons and a lot of middling seasons that were entertaining in their own way, but they were really not that competitive, are you looking for someone who says, this franchise has gone down that route for so long and it hasn't won many playoff games, and how can we shift? And when I say that, it's like, well, what is a shift? And I guess I would use the consensus board a little bit in a way of, do you understand like what's happening in football data analysis and application or not? And I don't need this person to be a data-driven GM. But I think what I mean is, are you really up to date on everything that has been studied and analyzed in the NFL to the point where you are the most modern decision-making front office? Like, do you understand what some people in the tech world, I don't really fully understand the language, but like the meta of what's happening in the NFL today? And you feel like when Philadelphia makes certain decisions, and I don't mean to just heap praise on them, but they really do win all the time, and Howie Roseman is really good at this, they just seem to get it. And there are times with the Vikings where you go, I think that the same decisions they made today were probably decisions that they would have made 10 to 15 years ago. And that even existed while Kwesi was here. And it's not a slight at anybody in particular. It just doesn't feel like when we analyze the signings, the timelines, the draft picks, and all those things, the way that draft capital has been managed over the years, and by timeline, I mean that in 2021, they made panicky moves at the end of training camp, like trading for Chris Herndon or bringing back Sheldon Richardson or whatever, just because they looked at the roster and said, oh man, like we got to win to save our jobs. And last year, where they make the panicky moves of, we won 14 games and we're going to McCarthy, so it's all chips to the middle of the table. And I know that they didn't like that framing, but what the heck else would you call it when you spend more money than anybody else in the NFL and you damage your long-term with majorly risky moves with older players, guys with injury histories, and you didn't get a deal on any of them. And when you look at that kind of offseason, you go, well, that's just what the Vikings would have done with Kirk Cousins, Sheldon Richardson the first time. Like, where is the edge is the question. Where would you point to right now and say, this is the clear edge? I think the edge is in the coaching staff. And I know all of you are better at calling plays from your couch than Kevin O'Connell is, but I think the Vikings do have one of the best passing game minds, and we'll see on the run game. Guess who has 10 fingers and was watching Alec Ingold fullback tape from the Miami Dolphins today? This guy, for an article I'm doing tomorrow about where Max Bredesen fits in, but not the point. Like, I think that coaching staff just in general, the cultural element, the passing game element, the relationships like with Justin Jefferson. Kevin O'Connell is a top half of the league head coach, and he has to win in the playoffs to be called anything better than that. But he is a very solid head coach, and you have maybe the best defensive coordinator in football. That's your edge right now. But can we point to the front office in recent years? I have one example I could think of where I said, okay, the Vikings have an edge. One example in the Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah era and all the way through this offseason to this moment. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think Rick at his time when they built the first Zimmer team was doing a great job. And then it just kind of got away from them, especially if you're going to sign Kirk, you can't just keep operating business as usual. You have to adjust, and they really didn't. That's not the point. But the only time that I would say the Vikings had a true edge where they made a move that I went, okay, I don't know who else in the league makes that move, and that's what puts you ahead, was in 2023 when they moved on from all those veteran players. But even then, it was only kind of a half measure because they didn't even, I think, go far enough to realize that when you're doing a rebuild there, then keeping Kirk Cousins just keeps you in the middle and doesn't get you a high enough draft pick to get the quarterback you really want. And here you are drafting QB5. So even then, they didn't go all the way into what a truly galaxy brain, next level general manager would do. And I'll give you an example of that. Like when they were playing Jalen Hurts, what was this, 2022 maybe, or 2021? And they benched him so they could get a better draft pick. And they fired Doug Peterson. And the locker room was mad and everyone was upset. And they drafted Devontae Smith, and he's awesome. It's just stuff like that. I know, like, it always kind of comes back to losing to win, but I mean everything. I mean identifying, and here's where they did a good job too. 2024, Blake Cashman, Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, identifying those guys as ascending players was very smart. Like Blake Cashman is an ascending player, very smart. Jonathan Grenard reaching a peak as a pass rusher, very smart. But those are really the only examples I could come up with. And I could come up with 50 more where they overpaid in draft capital, overpaid in a trade. The Adam Thielen thing is egregious. And all that sort of stuff. Like, there are so many examples of, yes, Byron Murphy is a really good cornerback, but you paid him the absolute top dollar at that position. I think Will Fries is a fine offensive guard, but you paid him the top dollar. So are we talking about looking for a general manager who is finding every single edge, staying at the absolute forefront of the NFL when it comes to being forward thinking? And sometimes it might be a little bit different and it might get criticized for being a little bit different, but are we looking for someone like that? Or are you looking for sort of stay the course? And I don't mean that as a disrespect at all to Rob Brzezinski, because the course has put them, the people they have in their building and the coaches they have that would have a lot of influence if Brzezinski is in charge, those people have had success. I mean, we just move on so quickly, but it's not that long ago that they're, playing a game in Detroit for the division and their 15th win, right? So this is why it's hard, because I actually don't know what the right answer is. Is it behind box number 2? I think the thing that I would not necessarily be too on board with would be just another person who's kind of been around the block and has done things a certain way and will be largely status quo with a different name and maybe make some small tweaks or whatever. I think you are looking for either, can you be quite a bit different from a fully different background, fully different organization, or completely stay the course of where you are, which is essentially the roster is Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores driving that bus. So I'm very curious about your guys' opinions on this and where you see it, and what type of GM that you guys are looking for. Like, are you looking for somebody who is much more along the lines of a Rob Brzezinski? Do you want to stay the course? Do you want to go a different direction? Like, how are we feeling about it? So let's jump in. I wanted to give you a FanDuel question of the day, of course, because we do it every day. That's why it's called the FanDuel question of the day. So here is the order post-draft on FanDuel for the NFC North. The Lions are plus 150. The Packers are plus 230. The Bears are plus 310. So that's your order: Lions, Packers, Bears. And then the Vikings are quite a bit behind at plus 600 to win the division. I would be curious about post-draft your order, if it's different than that, and if you think who won the NFC North in the draft. It wasn't the Packers probably, but did you feel like there was a winner in the NFC North of the draft? Okay, let's get into your questions and comments and thoughts and so forth, and we'll go from there. JP, why won't the Wilfs make the candidates known to the public? Any thoughts? I don't have a very good answer to that question, to tell you the truth. I don't know. I mean, that it may be, gosh, I mean, I guess I feel like I'd be reaching to try to figure out an answer there. Maybe that's just me being the reporter who wants to know. Like, I want to know just as much as you guys do, like who are the candidates that are going to be, involved in this race, but I'm not sure. Maybe it's just, I don't know. I don't have a good answer for you other than, maybe they just don't want everybody talking about their GM candidates. Like, I truly just don't have a great answer for you there. I wish that I did. I wish they included that in the statement of like, here's why. Maybe just because they don't want everybody sort of having takes on, is it going to be this person, that person? Maybe they think there's some competitive advantage to not having it out there as much, for who they talked to and who they were interested in. I don't know what that competitive advantage would be. So I'm not really sure. See, who they're robbing is not me and you. Well, who they're robbing is their social media team, who could make like slow motion videos of candidates walking in and make it all cinematic and stuff. Mama says, have a bad feeling about the Caleb Banks pick, just like I did with McCarthy pick. Never wanted us to draft McCarthy. It was obvious he wasn't ready out of college. All of this is to say, hire me as the GM. Yeah. Okay. That's funny. But Mama continues, I'm curious how the collaboration between the GM and KOC and Flores. I want the new GM to truly be old school and do what's best for the team, not catering to what the coaches want. Yeah, I mean, there have always been teams with different relationships. I had a really good conversation with Doug Whaley, who was the former general manager of the Buffalo Bills. I wrote an article about it a few weeks ago about exactly what you're talking about. And what Doug said to me was, you have to have if you hire somebody from the outside, you have to have a very clear, defined who's in charge of what. And that's where I think that the Vikings may have failed a bit with Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. Now, they might have had that behind the scenes, but it never felt like anybody had a real understanding of, well, does this guy have the final call? Does the buck stop with this guy? Or how does it work? And then, they go up there and always say, oh yeah, well, our decisions happen together and so forth. I don't need them to even tell us. I just need it to be obvious who it is that is making those final calls. So this is a really interesting question for the Vikings general manager search is, do you want somebody who is over Kevin O'Connell and who clearly is the person saying it all stops with me? And if Kevin O'Connell goes into the office and says, you know what, I just need Cam Akers one more time, just one more, I swear, not in 2027, but just one more time. Just send a sixth wherever. I need that GM to be like, no, I'm not going to do that. And there's much more extreme examples of that. But the dynamic of the GM and the coaching staff, the organization is going to want it to look like it's a united front, it's collaboration, whatever. But I think we all know in a competitive universe, that can be hard to do. I think actually, if you're looking for that, Rob Brzezinski is the guy you're looking for, because they really live on two different sides of the team building. Like, they live on the economic side versus the X's and O's side. And those two do clash, of course. But, Rob, that's like his superpower. That's his strength. And the strength of the coaches is the player evaluation. So, those two things I think can pretty seamlessly come together. But the other universe is you hire someone to come in and be, I am the roster building guy, and we're going to do it my way. That doesn't sound like what the Wilfs are looking for, but I also don't think that it's a bad thing. And Philadelphia would be the example. I also wonder how much Les Snead just straight up made the draft pick in Los Angeles. And I wonder about, does Les Snead have that in LA, where he's the guy that builds the team and Sean McVay coaches it? But make no mistake, Les Snead's the guy that's sending the draft picks out, or he's the one that's picking that quarterback, or, however it might be approached. That dynamic is super important. And, it really kind of comes down to, in some ways too, just, do you think that Kevin O'Connell needs to be evaluated, or do you think that Kevin O'Connell running the organization from his side, head coach, working with the roster and having a great influence over it, and maybe being the final say on the 53 and things like that, like, do you think that that's a good thing? And I guess I could go back and forth on that too. I don't think coaches are good at it, just in general. I think there needs to be a separation of football and state, where it's front office is making those decisions, and it's not just based on, and I think this draft could be okay, or even could be good, but it's not just based on how much you like sitting in the room with a guy. It also has to be based on playing the board. It also has to be based on value, positional value, all these different things that are layered into it, that maybe a general manager is going to say, I know you guys like that guy, but that's not a guy we take here. It's just not happening. Or, I know you guys hate the fit of this guy, but he's the most talented, and that's who we're taking. That could be an approach of a different general manager that they could be looking for. So I really truly cannot say with any conviction, I think one would be better than the other. One gives you a better chance to win the Super Bowl. I know which one probably sounds a little more enticing after going 9-8. And let's not forget allowing the Super Bowl winning quarterback to, leave the building. I think that maybe that does need to be evaluated. I also think when you get a coach of Kevin O'Connell's level, you have to think very hard about, putting that person on the hot seat or moving on from that person, because there's a lot of coaches that get hired every year who, the minute they take the job, you realize, that guy's actually not that great of a head coach. You already have a coach who can win 13 or 14 games and is not 59. Like, if he was 59, then I would say, hey, he could probably not win in the playoffs because X, Y, and Z. But what is he, 40, 41? So, like, I think that there's plenty of time to continue to get better there. And a lot of this all does come down to the quarterback too. I mean, if you're planning on Kyler Murray as your quarterback in the future, you might need the best cap guy there is running the show to work around that, rather than somebody who is going to say, we're going to do everything different. We're going to, make a lot of changes. What I really would like, no matter who the GM is to have a vision and stick to it, and have a plan and stick to it. And it's not always easy in football, but what seems to happen to this franchise all the time is they sort of sense the moment, and it's, hey, future be darned. Here goes all the chips into the middle of the table. Let's go win. And I would suspect that comes from the top, because how would you not want that if you're the ownership? If you go to the NFC Championship and you feel like the thing that really cost you was not having a quarterback, how do you not, sign Kirk Cousins, right? I get it. That's a different seat that I'm in than the ownership is. But they've just done it enough times where, okay, this is our time. We got to make all these moves and do all this stuff and everything else, and future be darned, and spend the most cash and whatever. And it's like, okay, but if this doesn't work out, history is going to repeat itself here. David, any intel on Jennings, on Juwan Jennings? Yeah, no, I haven't heard anything, but those are things with the visits where timelines are always different. Sometimes and I appreciate your guys' endorsement for general manager. I think I'd be better on the advising committee. You know why? Because I listen to football people talk for a lifetime, right? Like a decade long of listening to football people talk. Now I've heard everything you got, so I can hear through, BS. I'd be the good BS meter of the committee. They look at me and they go, yeah? Like, no. That's what I do. That's my job on the committee. But no, I haven't heard anything about whether Juwan Jennings is going to sign here or not. Love the idea, but he might be visiting 5 or 6 different teams and then we'll make his decision. Or it could just be entirely on he has a dollar figure and we'll see. And, maybe it actually could be later on in the summer. Sometimes players visit and it ends up being like 8 weeks later that they end up signing. So we'll see. That was the case with Stephon Gilmore. Gilmore came in like the early part of camp or something. And then it was when camp ended that he finally signed. And not a report, but I suspect Carson Wentz may have talked to someone with the Vikings before he just up and signed at the end of training camp last year. Joker says, can't be a nice guy. This is the GM. Be able to tell the Wilfs that we're doing a plan that includes years with losses and to deal with it. And don't be obsessed with proving how smart you are and make obvious moves. I think that's all good advice. Joker. And this was something that Zach Lowe said on his podcast a long time ago, has always kind of stuck with me. He said that a lot of GMs in the NBA, and I imagine this applies to the NFL as well, one of the best things that they can do is they can really get through to ownership on the approaches that they need to be taking. And now I think we need to also give like the Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah era credit to get them to a certain point where they were winning 14 games and they built a very good team and they did the right thing in 2023. And honestly, if JJ McCarthy was even the 17th best quarterback in the league, they are in the playoffs with a really good chance to win in the playoffs last year. And Kwesi is not fired, right? So we got to remember that it's not like everything he did was wrong. Understanding timelines is huge, but here's what I want. I want a general manager, and maybe this is Rob, because Rob just got a pretty good trade done with Jonathan Grenard. And I don't mean that the draft picks were great. I mean that the overall thing, when you add up the cap space for the future, not just sort of bending to sign him, that was actually different than Rick and Kwesi era. Because Rick and Kwesi era, I mean, I almost thought they won't trade Grenard. We'll just get into like a 4-day little spat in training camp and then they'll sign him, just like with Hawkinson, just like with Hunter year after year. And it's like, oh, they traded him. Because he kind of drew a line in the sand there. Like, we're not going to extend this guy, and we can either make a big old mess or we can get draft capital for him now, because if we try to trade him after next year and he only gets 3 sacks, we're not getting jack for him then. So I liked that as kind of a, hey, this is a tough decision. We got to do it from Rob Brzezinski. I thought that did take some guts to do as the just acting general manager, sending out one of the best players on the team. I think we should give Rob credit for that. But whether it's him or it's someone else, I do think, and I agree with your point where I'll give you an example that it just lives in my brain. I just cannot, it's like one of those, I can't let it go. In 2023, Kirk Cousins goes to Green Bay. He's playing a great game and then his Achilles tears. At that moment, it is clear to everyone under the sun, they are not making the playoffs unless Tom Brady shows up. Tom Brady didn't show up. Did they maybe text him? Possibly, but he did not show up. At that point, you have to trade Danielle Hunter. He's the best player on your team. All he's going to do is help you win games that you don't need to win. And you're not a contender. That ended. Now, the way that team was headed, it was picking up steam, and I think they could have made the playoffs and things could have been interesting. The way that Kirk was playing. I mean, that was the best we saw Kirk play, or it was up there. But that's not what happened. He tore his Achilles. They won a game. oh, we're still in the mix. We could play some combination of Jaron Hall, trade for Josh Dobbs, throw in Nick Mullins to do what? Like I need the general manager, whoever it is, to be able to say, we're trading him because we're not making the playoffs, period. And if Kevin O'Connell, no, I could coach him up. No, you can't. We got to live with where we're at. And when you have a 14-win season or a 13-win season that's maybe driven, although they handled the 13-win season well, but it's driven a little bit by something that's surprising, maybe some schedule elements to it and so forth, playing the AFC South that year, to just say, hey, actually all the things that we did that were smart to get here, we're going to throw those out the window. We're just going to make now bad decisions like that. That's not what you want to see from the next general manager. David, football junkie with a scouting background in front office development. I imagine that the person will be a football junkie because they're applying for general manager jobs for a football team. But in terms of like the scouting, well, the scouting is a part of this entire thing because do the Wilfs have the stomach for someone to tell them, for someone to sit in a room, if it's a really good general manager candidate, and be like, look, your front office around the league is respected, but you're not feared. So I'm going to fire a bunch of people. And I'm sorry, that sucks for them, but I'm firing them. And I'm hiring my people, and we're going to do things our way, top to bottom. I'm not going to have your people trying to convince me to do things their way or struggling to adjust or, whatever else. I'm going to move on from most of the people in this front office, and I'm going to bring in all of my people. Do they have the stomach for that? I don't know that they do, because I think that they love a lot of people in that front office who have been with them a long time. I think the Wilfs are loyal, and I think they care about people, which I don't want to criticize because those are good things in real life, to care about people, to be loyal. I also think that blaming scouts for stuff is something that sports talk radio callers do because they don't know what scouts do. At the same time, that when you've had all these same people here with the same results, and a lot of them are very, very good at their jobs, if somebody else has a completely different vision, then you just got to make a change. And I'm sorry, that's how the sport works. It's ruthless and it's tough sometimes. But if somebody else has a totally different vision, then you need to make major changes rather than saying, new person, just work with everyone here, it'll be fine. I don't know how well that works in sports. This is why it's so interesting. And I want to know the candidate names. Tell them to me, Wilf. Doesn't matter which Wilf, any of them. Just tell me. The Matt Tracker says, based on how things have gone for them, I'd like to see them take whichever candidate they like and then hire the complete opposite. Okay, yeah, we've gotten very cynical in the comments at times, Matt. That's too much. Third and nerdy, I'd like to see some outside influence that is given the authority. I feel like the Vikings have kind of become a country club of nice people. It's kind of hard to disagree with that. And look, nice people can finish first, okay? Like, you don't have to be a sociopath to win in the National Football League. You have to have a good team and usually a good quarterback. And that's the way that you win in football. So if you have a bunch of nice people making decisions or a bunch of mean people, we've seen 13 win seasons either way. Like, right? Within the last decade, we've seen the mean people, we've seen the nice people. And, it's usually comes down to the players you have on the field. I think what you might be talking about is that, does everybody show up to work every day, over the last number of years thinking my job could be on the line, I got to push, whatever it might be. I mean, maybe you're getting to that point, but I don't want to disrespect people who are working hard to win a championship. And if you've been here, like a lot of the people for many years, this becomes your home, your family, your blood. Like Rob Brzezinski, for example. I mean, this man cares about the Minnesota Vikings, this state, everything else. So it's not like, oh yeah, okay, I'm just going to kind of put it in cruise control or something. I think he would push very hard to win. It's really about, do you want to make a franchise shift? And if you do, then now is a good time to do it, because this is the last year of something. And then there's something new at the end of the rainbow. And the rainbow might take you to the divisional round, the NFC Championship. I don't know where it's going. Once upon a time, I thought the Vikings would win like 10 games in 2017 or in 2022. I probably had them as a 9 or 10 win team, and they ended up winning a lot more than that. So we don't know where this is going to go. Kyler Murray could be incredible. The defense could be top notch. Caleb Banks could be great right away. They could just be a dangerous, super good team. They could get Jawan Jennings, and then they could, make a chase for it. But the reality, based on contracts and age, is for a lot of these players, it's just not easy to see the future. So this is a time that if you want to make a shift, that you can do it, because the next person is going to have a lot of roster flexibility. And I actually wonder if that's why those extensions we've talked about have not happened. Why a Cashman? Why an O'Neal extension? I mean, you don't know if the next GM wants to extend Brian O'Neal or not. So they draft another tackle and you kind of see what happens. And, that's okay. But are they going to feel like, no, that's not a player that you extend because of an injury history or whatever, or let him play out his contract? Like, that might be how the next person feels. So there's a lot that's up in the air for next year that the next GM could make a decision on. So if they look at it like you want a full shift, then change out front office, change out scouting, the major parts, make it yours, make it the next person's, and go into the future with something that at very least you rolled the dice on and said, we're going to try something that might work over something that we haven't seen work. I mean, once you start to think about, like, what do they have? 3 playoff wins. I mean, that's where this franchise is tough to talk about, because I completely believe that the Minnesota Vikings are a top franchise in the NFL. And yet what they have is a lot of regular season to back that up and not a lot of playoffs to back that up. What they have is good, but they do not have like the next level for their results. And a lot of that does tie back to the quarterback situation, which is also why it's a good time to do it, because a new GM comes in with new ideas about how to build the roster, and that guy gets to pick his quarterback. And that's a pretty favorable spot for a general manager to be in. So if you're going to do it, if you're going to make a total overhaul, then do it right now, because there won't be a better time than this roster-wise. Antonio says clear vision for the offensive defense, culture, and mission to draft blue chip players. I think that, most people are going to have that. O'Connell and Flores do provide you with clear visions for the offensive defense. I mean, I think that's a nice thing, is that, right off the bat what that looks like with them, like what Flores wants for players, what O'Connell, these guys are proven, it's worked. In terms of the mission to get blue chip players, that's the tough part, because if you're not drafting high, then that's, not always what you're going to do. Okay, you guys it's a comedy hour a little bit here. Purple Kool-Aid says, hopefully someone with a football background, someone not afraid to take the franchise by the reins and do what needs to be done if it's not always popular with every coach and the fans. That second part, I mean, whoever it is going to have a football background. I mean, I know Kwesi didn't exactly, but he worked for the 49ers. He was an assistant GM. It's not like he was picked off of the streets of New York and they just said, hey, financier, why don't you come run our team, like some Disney movie from the 90s. He was in the NFL. But I think what you mean is like a scouting background. I don't need it to be one thing or the other. Howie Roseman came from the Cap world, and that's where Rob comes from. And the Cap people, they are much more in tune, I think, with paying attention to weighing options of what gives us the best cap flexibility in the future, what gives us the most draft capital. Rob said, I believe this team needs to be built through the draft. And like, I agree with him. Thank you very much for the super chat, Antonio. Bruno says strong analytics skill optional. Totally disagree. 1 gazillion% disagree. Every general manager in the NFL now has to understand what this stuff says, because not only is it not going away, The best teams are using it in the best ways. And here's the reality of the Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah era. He may have been the best analytics mind to be a GM. I'm not sure that he was, but he might have been. He may have been the analytics mind most capable of building a model by himself. But I promise you did not end up applying with actual moves the best analytics principles. Sadly, that goes to your friends in Philadelphia. I think Philadelphia by far has run away with the best analytic principle application over the last decade. It's just a reality. Like when you look at all the things that have been deeply studied by smart people, and that doesn't mean you follow it every time, but all analytics are is studying stuff. And when you study that certain things should warn you about certain players in the draft and you do it anyway, it's like, okay, I mean, you can, but you have to understand the risks that come involved with that. And I'm not saying the Vikings never paid attention to it. It's just, it was hard to find right there of like, this is why, they've hacked the comp pick system. Well, they didn't. This is why they have some of the best finds in free agency deep in the woods. Well, sure, a couple of them, but they mostly came from Brian Flores just liking people. The best contract structures or the best whatever it might be. Are you hacking the league in some way? And, one of those ways is drafting freaking Mekhi Lemon. Of course they did. I have no idea if he's going to be good or not, but of course they did, right? They ran A.J. Brown right to the end. They structured their whole roster build where they got A.J. Brown at the right time. They squeezed every amount out of him. Now they're going to send him off to New England, bring in the next wide receiver who's a high draft pick, and it's like, there he did it again. They build the best offensive line, and then they make a little bit of an anti-analytics move to get Saquon Barkley, but they recognize that Saquon in the right scenario would be a beast, especially because running quarterbacks have an impact on running backs, which maybe will help the Vikings this year with Kyler Murray. But a running quarterback like Jalen Hurts helps. We've seen this from Lamar Jackson. We've seen it from Josh Allen. So understanding that you can give Saquon Barkley more. I'm not saying that Philly has done everything perfect for sure. It's just that it's not hard to find that they get it, that they understand how to apply, all these data principles. So I need someone with the credibility to apply them. I need someone with the background to understand them, but that could be the oldest school GM. Tell you a quick story. One of the first people to have an analytics guy in football in the last, whatever number of years that actually involved computers was Bill Parcells. It's in my book over there for the New York Giants. The guy who first worked with Pro Football Focus worked for Tom Coughlin, but he was originally hired to do stuff with IT and computers and data under Bill Parcells, who is like the most old school coach, but also Bill Parcells in his era was the most go for it on fourth down coach in the entire NFL. So you don't have to look a certain way. You don't have to wear a bow tie and have big nerdy glasses to understand the data. You just got to understand what it tells you. And, we see some teams that have former players as coaches who apply data successfully all the time. So I don't think we need to stereotype people in terms of that. So if they hire an old school person or former player or whatever, it doesn't mean that that person doesn't understand analytics or how to apply it. The Ravens under Ozzie Newsome for a very long time, they emerged as one of the most analytical front offices. And that's a former player. Jay says the Vikings need a GM that everyone likes. However, be willing to say no. Also be a better negotiator. We have not had that in a while. The negotiating does seem like one of the troubles, and this is why I like the Jonathan Grenard trade in principle, is that Jonathan is such a great guy. Grenard is just the best. I mean, he is as hardworking, as energetic, as likable. He is an ultimate pro. And it was just a black and white decision. And I feel like Rob showed something there. Do you think that Flores wanted Jonathan Grenard gone? Absolutely not. You think Kevin O'Connell wanted him gone? No. I'm not saying that they fought over it. I'm not saying that. Like, do you, just as like a coach, you want the most talent you can have. You want the most leadership you can have. But at the end of the day, Rob looked at it and said, this is the reality of the situation, and we have to be real about it and trade him. And that's what they did. I think it took some guts to do that, especially as a guy who's not sitting in that chair and could have easily said, I'm going to let the next guy deal with it. So I like that. I like that from Rob. But, the negotiating part, it has felt a lot like when you overly love guys, and this would happen at times, that you just kind of end up giving them what they want. Third and nerdy thing that bothered me in hindsight was they hired Kwesi, but decided they weren't going to really let him bring in his own team beyond Ryan Grigson. That for sure had an impact on the success of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. I think that had that happened, it might have been a little different in terms of the vibe, that he would have been able to bring in people that were more along his lines of thinking rather than trying to sell a front office that, you may have run to the end of your rope with Rick Spielman, and so did Mike Zimmer, but Rick was very well thought of in the Vikings front office by people who worked there. He treated people extremely well, and he was very professional, and Rick just had a lot of respect. So when you fire Rick and you bring in someone who is so different, I think that he ran into a lot of brick walls right away. And then, of course, that 2022 draft and the 2023 thing and everything, it kind of, I shouldn't say it fell apart from there, because they still built good football teams that even when they had terrible quarterback play were capable of winning 9 games. So it didn't fall apart, but it was definitely uncomfortable. And it was ultimately the reason that people inside the building felt like they needed someone else to take them. And I think that, the overwhelming majority, I'm guessing, inside the building wants Rob Brzezinski to take it over. Not just like, hey, I won't get fired, but even if they were told they're not going to get fired, because of the amount of respect they have for the way he goes about his business. Purple Kool-Aid, I think Rob did a good job. You can't run a team like you're playing on franchise mode in Madden. He made some smart moves and has us in good shape going forward. I would agree with all that. I think that Rob Brzezinski managed this offseason as well as an acting general manager could, and put them in a position where they are not screwed for the future. And that's a pretty big deal. Third and nerdy, I want a GM that knows and has worked with KOC. I'm thinking of a McVay-Snead partnership. Well, that depends on how the ownership feels about Kevin O'Connell. No matter what happens, thick, thin, up and down for this season, whatever comes next, I think I've seen enough of Kevin O'Connell to say this is a coach that, unless things vastly change, is a very good person to have running your team long-term, that you want to think long-term, not next year. If it doesn't work out, he's gone. Or with Zimmer, one of the things that is just, again, sort of stuck in my craw for a long time, which is if Mike Zimmer wins this playoff game, he stays. And if he loses this playoff game, he goes. What? I mean, and then they do the same thing with Sam Darnold. Like, there you go. Whoever the next GM is, I need them not to think that way. And I need the Wilfs not to think that way. I need them not to think, if Kevin O'Connell is 9-7 going into the last week of this season, to go, well, if he wins, he stays, and if he loses, he goes. Like, don't do it that way. Do it about who's going to put you in a position to be good long-term. And I think O'Connell is that person. So and I also think Flores is that person. I think this combination, I think without Flores, it might look a little bit different for O'Connell, but at least in recent years. But, if you have a combination that's considered one of the better coaching staffs in the league, then you want to stay with that. So the next general manager has to have a good sense for those guys and how that dynamic is going to work and how they're going to work together. So does that mean if they hire someone from O'Connell's background who knows him, and that's really a double, triple down on Kevin O'Connell as the long-term head coach of this team. Don't think that's bad, because the background is from the Rams, who have just consistently not only won once, but then built another team that's had them right there. Very impressive stuff from them. Matt says, isn't him letting the coaches run the draft him not wanting to be a reason to not want him as the general manager? Well, I don't think so. I mean, I think that there's two different ways of doing it when it comes to the draft. There's either the general manager says, I'm drafting, and you guys can go float on a boat during draft weekend. which I don't think that happens a ton, but I think that there are general managers who say, this is how we're going to go about it in the draft. And I'm making the calls and I'm picking the players. I think that there was a lot of that with Rick. I think that Rick, and some of the stories we heard about 2021 and Zimmer walking out of the draft room when they took Kellen Mond or whatever else. Like, I think that Rick was, I'm running the draft and you're involved and your opinions are there, but I'm the one who's calling these shots. And then you're the one that's going to work with everybody to then decide what's a best fit for the coaches. There's two different ways of going about it. I would not say, oh, well, your coaches feel like they got good fit players, so you're fired, because that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I don't actually know what one of those two things is better. I would suspect that playing the board game that is the draft long-term over 100 drafts is better, but I don't know if they're going to fail this draft just because they let Brian Flores decide that he liked a fat nose tackle. Like, I don't know. Lance says, all I want to see is good, solid drafts. Then what you want, Lance, is draft picks. That's what you want. That would be my biggest criticism of Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah during the entire time, is that this team, Kwesi did an interview when he first got here and said something about like not going full Rams or whatever. And yet they said, bleep them picks. And they went all in with a bunch of, crazy contracts. So they kind of did that. And then this is what happens when it doesn't work out, which, it did for the Rams. So they get to forever be geniuses, but it didn't for the Vikings. So someone gets fired. But draft picks, stockpiling draft capital is hands down the best way to do this. And there's ways to do it. There's letting players go at the right times. There's making trades. Now that's where I think Rob Brzezinski would be very good. I think Rob Brzezinski would care a lot about the comp formula. I think he would care a lot about trading players or letting players go in their prime to get draft capital back in return, like a long-term stockpiling of assets that eventually comes through. And I think that after this year, they're going to have a longer-term vision. This is a good argument for Rob Brzezinski, what you're saying. It's like, whether Flores likes a draft pick or not, which I don't know. Is he good at this? Yes. But whether Flores likes a draft pick or not, that's not really the point. The point is that there are percentages for every draft pick that you take. And if you don't take many players, your percentages of the accumulation of your draft success is not likely to be very high. When I analyzed Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah's draft history in terms of hits or misses, just eyeballing it based on the percentages from a PFF study, he hit on the exact amount of percentage that you would expect him to hit on for where they drafted. But they didn't draft almost ever. I mean, I was sitting here on day 2 being like, man, this is fun. What have I been? Oh yeah, we never did this because they didn't have picks. So if you're going to do it the next time, you have to take a stockpiling approach of how are you going to get as much draft capital as possible to build up a 2017-ish type team that was built through the draft. But that might take a longer term approach. That might take a 3-year approach rather than just, oh, we got a little taste of success. Now we have to go all in. Bruno, Canada must be good at drafting non-injured players. There's always going to be risks to that. I don't love it either. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, even last year with the free agents, some of the guys who they got that were injured played 700 or 800 snaps, and some guys were out most of the season. But the Banks thing is complicated. It is, because they clearly have much better medical information than we do. But we also have the little common sense in our brain of, you sure you want to draft a player with many injuries? So Leonard says some drafts could be evaluated immediately. Finks used to draft 4 or 5 guys at one position. I really don't think, I mean, yes, okay, we can evaluate the process of, wow, you really did something that was way different than made sense. Or you drafted a player, and I actually do have an answer for you guys, by the way. I do have an answer for you guys. So last night, I was attempting to eyeball, and I got an answer from this. So I was attempting to eyeball what Caleb Banks's pre-combine work out where he got hurt, like what his draft stock was. And Benjamin Robinson sent it to me. Benjamin has been on the show from Grinding the Mocks. I don't know if you could see that. See that beautiful little chart there? I'll read what it says to you. So Caleb Banks' draft stock before the NFL Combine was that he was the 23rd player consensus-wise, at least by Ben's metrics. And there are a couple of different consensus websites, and there's a Reefs board and everything else, but 23rd was where Caleb Banks was before. So if we take them at their word with the medical evaluation, which, I mean, obviously since they made the decision, they believe in it. If we take that out of the evaluation, which people didn't know he was going to get hurt again, he was more along the 23rd player that they drafted 18th. I'm not trying to talk you into it. I'm just saying it's a factor that we have to keep in mind. Now, he did have another injury. It is something to be worried about. When really good analysts have him in the 50s, it's something to worry about. But that's just a point that needs to be brought up, is in terms of their degree of reach, it may have actually been less of a degree of reach than it looked because people dropped him due to an injury they didn't know about. And to show you how awful the outside world is at knowing medical information, Jermod McCoy on consensus board was a top 15 player and was drafted in the 4th round. And Will Johnson was a top 15 player that was drafted in the 2nd round last year. And Nakobe Dean was a top player who was drafted in the 3rd round. The insiders are outside when it comes to medical information. So that all that has to be factored into the discussion. What would I grade the Vikings draft? I think on draft night, I was hovering between C+ and B-, and I think I would stay there. I don't think that the accumulation of this amount of talent that they got is like franchise changing, but I think, and I do, believe in some reaches being troublesome. But I also think that they grabbed players that will fit really well with who they are as a franchise and future positions. So that to me, and the fact that they had to give away Jonathan Grenard, it's a fine trade, but it's in the discussion. You had to trade away one of your best players. That means as a franchise, you're taking an L overall, even if you did a decent job in the trade. So I was baking that into it. Hey, like 2/3, I don't know, man, for a guy who's that good. But if we kind of take that out of it and just look at the players, yeah, I would go B-. It's hard to look at this and say, yeah, these are franchise-changing players. Like Dominique Orange is a franchise-changing player. Well, he could be really good. And I love that type of player. I love a good fullback, right? It's usually not that hard to find defensive tackles and fullbacks. And, I think that Jacoby Thomas, a safety, like playmaking safety, like, okay, like he looks like a good player from last year he was, but I have a little concern there that it might have been a 1-year thing and they might have overvalued how much they love the character and things like that. So I go back and forth. I really, really like the Damon Claiborne pick. I think that one was a great decision to get him. And I really, really like the Jake Golday fit. So, first pick is too risky for me and is not Mekhi Lemon, so who was there. And second round, I really liked. You kind of have to individually go through. I mean, the Dominique Orange one, I think he could be an awesome guy to watch, and he could do everything that they're asking him to do. I just wonder is that the best use of the capital right there with the nose tackle? And I didn't love how he played last year. So, I wavered. Antonio, Big Citrus should bring a lot to the field this year. I think he's going to play a lot. I definitely think he's going to play a lot. Matt, if these picks are developmental, then why did they get Kyler? They seem to be trying to pull off the dreaded competitive rebuild. No, I don't. I just am not on the same page with you on some of this stuff, Matt. And I don't think that you ever really can draft for right now unless you have a top 10 draft pick. If they were drafting 3rd overall and they took Caleb Banks, I'd be like, you're out of your skulls. Get Jeremiah Love and let's go. But that's not where they were at, right? Or Carnell Tate, like get those guys. They weren't in that position. Now, maybe Mekhi Lemon could help them right away. Maybe Dylan Thieneman could have helped them a little more right away than Caleb Banks. So there is that. But even then, the only positions that have kind of proven, and this is where Thieneman would make sense, The only positions that are really proven to impact right away are safety and running back. Everything else needs development. Wide receiver in this offense might have gone a little faster, probably. If they had an idea to get Juwan Jennings, maybe that's different. But I look at every draft for the following year. It's just, that's the history of the draft most of the time outside of the top 10. So if you're the Vikings and you're drafting out, look, if you get Jefferson or Addison, those guys are great right away. Well, congratulations. That doesn't happen that often. Normally it takes a player a little bit of time. So I don't have an issue with these guys will need development. Everyone is going to, but I think I understand what you're getting at is if we believed that they were going to make a type of draft to try to squeeze out every ounce from 2026, they didn't do that. They probably could have taken a different approach to do that. Dirty Mike, the operation was not good. Rob was a doormat for the coaches. Well, if you're a general manager who has been in charge of the salary cap for most of your career, and you've got your scouts and your coaching staff all working together in collaboration, and they come to decisions on the players, on the evaluations, it seems like almost too much belief on your part, like on fans' part, like you believe, or too much belief in the mock drafters who thought Shadur Sanders was a top 10 draft pick. Like, not saying, like, I know all about the reaches. We've been over this a million times, but in some ways I think, who do you think you are with some of these guys? Like, you give a bad grade because, he wasn't as high on my board. Oh, okay. Well, I guess, you must know way better. I don't know. There's a narcissism to this whole thing that kind of is weird to me and always has been. But just in general manager does not mean I make whatever the F decision I effing feel like. That's not, it is in some cities, but usually it's not. It's more of you get your scouting reports and you bring them in and you get your personnel people and your coaches and you get together and you have meetings and you discuss this stuff and you look for the players that fit the best with your team and then you draft them. And that's what they did. I mean, in some ways, like, again, if we consider Dominique Orange a little less of a stretch than it looked like because of the medical thing. I mean, every other pick other than Jacoby Thomas, a late third rounder, every other pick is either ahead of or in the same ballpark of where they were expected to be. Every other pick that they took was something that they need within the next 2 years. I mean, some people are acting like this draft was a bunch of just randos that we'd never heard of, that weren't on any, the beast or whatever. It's like, okay, maybe we're going a little bit too far deciding today for some of you that you know how this draft's going to turn out when it's an absolute fact that none of us do. Third and Nerdy would like to see some GM with bravado. If there was any point actually, I think Rob showed it a little bit. I think bravado came in the form of not doing anything in free agency. Like, don't you think that there was some behind the scenes, like, hey, we need to get this free agent. We should restructure this deal. We should do this, that, or the other thing. Like, and he stuck to his guns there and, with the Jonathan Grenard trade. So I think there was some bravado there, but maybe not, like, he's not a big media guy. Antonio, if things go bad this year, will KOC get fired and Flores become the head coach? Like, I have no idea. I honestly think that the way the Wilfs feel about Kevin O'Connell, things would have to go horrifically wrong. Absolutely horrifically wrong in order to fire Kevin O'Connell. I don't see that making a lot of sense. Dirty Mike, managing the cap is pretty trivial. Rob has amazing PR with great at the cap. All it takes to navigate the cap is elementary math and an owner willing to pay guarantees. Rob is kind of a self-deprecating guy. He might agree with you when it comes to that, but I don't agree with you when it comes to that. I think it's way, way more complex than you are trying to make it. When it comes to the cap. But I think the point about the cap person being good as a general manager is that this is a game of bean counting sometimes. This is a game of just hold up two hands, and in one hand is Jonathan Grenard, and in the other hand is 2 third-round draft picks and $34 million of cap space, and you go, oh, and also it's Jonathan Grenard and $50 more million guaranteed, and you go, all right, this is hard because there's a really good player involved, but we're going to have to take the $34 million and two third-round draft picks. That's accounting. That's cap management in some sort of way and asset management. So you want somebody who's really good at that. And I mean, I think saying he's got good PR, like he's considered around the NFL. This is from other people around the NFL that talk about his ability in this area. But yes, of course, cash is important. The fact that they, ownership is willing to spend. But Rob was the one who was making it all work. Dirty Mike, why do we trust Flores with player evaluation? He wanted Turner over Verse. Man, I mean, these are just bad points, dude. Like, yeah. Well, first of all, I wouldn't even say, I don't even know if they got that wrong. Like at this moment, yeah, Jared Verse has been a really good player for the Rams. According to Vikings fans, he's Reggie White, but he's been a really good player for them. Dallas Turner's on a different timeline. Jared Verse was older than me when he got drafted. Jared Verse remembers Bill Parcells coaching in the NFL. Dallas Turner was one of the youngest players in that draft. The Vikings drafted players this year who are as old as Dallas Turner. I mean, Chuck Demings is as old as Dallas Turner. That I can look up their birthdays for you. It's got to be pretty close. I think they're both 23. So, they took the younger player, and last year Turner showed what he's got. But I mean, if you're saying, well, Flores doesn't know how to evaluate, I mean, come on, like this is now we're being ridiculous. Now we're just being mad for being mad. Like look at the turnaround of this defense. He's had one top 100 draft pick, and this defense has gone from bottom 3 to consistently top 10, which is hard to do for anybody consistently. And I mean, saying that like he can't evaluate is like, all right. I mean, Kobe can't shoot a jumper like this. He's as good as it gets when it comes to that. It's not flawless. Like every single, you take a guy, Mekhi Blackman or something, who they got half a good season out of. You take him with the 108th pick or whatever. If he doesn't work out, you guys treat it like he committed a homicide or something. Norse Force, it would be awkward bringing someone else in after the outstanding work from Rob Brzezinski. Well, I think that Rob would just probably, he's done this for a long time. So if they went in a different direction, he would, I assume, go back to doing what he did before and be professional about it. So, I don't know. I mean, yeah, like I guess a little bit if people are sold on him. Son of Beavers, really, well, actually, Matt, you make a point about, well, it's a little bit weird because you're right that the Jaguars general manager who came from the Rams, right, has done some bizarre stuff. The Jags were in the playoffs last year, but their draft was very weird. I don't know, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. It was very weird. Just because, this is a fair point to make, just because someone comes from another organization that's good does not mean that they are a genius or that they'll be perfect. That's for sure. Son of Beavers, I really hope we bring in someone from outside the building. Maybe all these teams with other front offices, people quitting are going to come here and work. I don't know. The Philadelphia guy that everyone was convinced was quitting to become the Vikings GM, apparently he's leaving the industry. That's at least what it says. So if I become the GM, will I keep doing live streams? Yeah, sure. Yeah, because the odds are not particularly great that I will be named. I'm not asking to be GM. I'm just asking to be part of the committee. I don't think it's crazy. I really don't. I mean, when you think about like how closely we reporters study the team, like, I don't know how closely we study people. We listen to every word, we write it down, and then we share it with everyone. I don't know. Just want to be part of the committee. Just let me in. I'll help. Antonio, do we really want to bring in someone who will upset the apple cart? Well, this is, in my opinion, this is the right time because this apple cart is headed for a cliff. Whee! And it's going over regardless. When you go to overthecap.com, look at 2027, look at the free agents they have or the contracts that are void, the number of openings on the depth chart, the quarterback situation, which is completely up in the air. It's the right time. There is no cart. I mean, the cart is teetering right now And at the end of 2026, just real quick, I'll save you the time. If you think Aaron Jones is probably out, TJ Hawkinson, maybe Will Fries, could be Brian O'Neill. We'll see. I mean, Jordan Addison seems like he's pretty well settled, but Cashman, Grenard's already gone. Van Ginkel, don't know his status. Isaiah Rodgers is a free agent. Byron Murphy gets very expensive next year, might be up for being cut. Well, that's like 9 or 10 key players right there. And they got to pay Will Reichard, right? Is that next year? Is it the year after? Pay him now. Whenever he becomes available. That doesn't matter. But the point just being that like a lot of key, it actually does matter that they keep him because he's amazing. But long term, there's a lot of key players, even to next year, that are not going to be here or their status is up in the air. And the same goes for Kyler Murray and JJ McCarthy. So if there's not a better time to bring in a new GM, right? So now would be the time. Son of Beavers, surprised we brought in another DT, Eric Johnson. Oh yeah, I wanted to get to that. Yeah, they did bring in Eric Johnson II. His dad apparently played in the XFL, which sounds like a Purple Insider story if I've ever heard one. But he's more of just kind of a run stuffing guy, and he's got some physical ability that's impressive, but hasn't played a ton of snaps in the NFL. Was a later round, like a day 3 draft pick who shined at the Senior Bowl. They must see something. They need some veteran on the team, some veteran depth. Hasn't really performed at much of a high level so far in his career. Maybe there's something there. Antonio, so you're saying that Kyler will only be here for one season. He might be. There's no way we're paying him top money for salary cap reasons. Well, so here's the thing about Kyler Murray is that there is a middle ground of quarterback that has emerged in the NFL that is Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Geno Smith last year. There's a number of guys, Daniel Jones, and with the amount that the cap goes up every year and the way you can structure contracts, it's just all very different than when it was with Kirk. So if he plays well and they really like him and they think that they can win long-term with him and Jefferson has 1,700 yards or something, like they'll sign him if he wants to stay here. They'll do that because they're not going to repeat the same mistake twice and let a really good quarterback walk out the door. That is very risky for salary cap reasons, but and I say that now, but I don't know who the GM is going to be. So that does depend, but I mean, more likely than not. That might be a good thing. And actually now I'm bouncing around a little on this because it might be a good thing that the last GM who made the Darnold mistake or was part of it is not here to try to chase that mistake. That whoever is the GM will be evaluating Kyler Murray based on, is it worth it to sign him and can they do it? But with all the money coming off the books that I just mentioned, you could do it with Murray. It just has to be at a decent price and a good structure, but you can do it. I mean, Seattle built up a roster through really, really good decisions and really, really good drafting and won the Super Bowl with a quarterback who was being paid like the 12th best, whatever it was. He was making like 30 something. But it wasn't a ton. I think it was maybe 33 or whatever. His cap hit was maybe $16 million for last year. So there has emerged as a middle ground in the NFL that was not there before. Purple Kool-Aid, will the Wilfs' refusal to let a GM rebuild cost us another preferred candidate like it did with Ryan Poles? I don't know if that's the reason Ryan Poles didn't take the job, but that should be a part of the discussion is, hey, if there's a point where we got to have a reset year, is that going to be something that is allowed to happen? I think the answer is never going to be yes with this team. So how do you work within the confines of that will definitely be a question. Louis Riddick has been interviewed at times, I think, for general manager jobs. I don't know Louis very well. I mean, I think he's a smart football guy, but he's as football as it gets, and he's got the background, played in the league, and was a scout before, so maybe he's somebody that they'll consider. I don't know. We can only guess until I make my way on the committee. Then we can only guess for now. Speaking of the NFC North, by the way, the FanDuel question of the day, don't forget about that, is what's your order post-draft, and which NFC North team do you think won the draft out of the 4. Right now, the Lions at plus 150 are still the favorites to win the NFC North after the draft, and the Vikings are still at the bottom at plus 600. Their odds actually went down a bit. Pizza Gary, why are we so afraid to start asking questions about the Wilfs? They've made some very, let's say, inexperienced type decisions when it comes to selecting managers and coaches, etc. I mean, I don't know that anyone is afraid necessarily. I think that fair. I mean, it's very easy when it comes to anyone to just sort of take some mud in your hand and throw it at them when things didn't go the way that you wanted it to go. Like, so, well, they didn't tank in 2023, which led to them not getting Drake May. So, yeah. And look, I've been the first to kind of pound that drum, but we got to tell the whole picture of this ownership. The franchise that they've built, the coaching staff that they currently have, the roster that they've invested in has been, I mean, you just don't get much better in terms of ownership than that. And when it comes to making bad coaching decisions, I'm not even sure who you mean. Like Brad Childress, maybe? They did go to an NFC championship with Favre and Childress, but maybe he wasn't a great coach. Les Frazier, I guess you could say. Les kind of got hung out to dry with the roster. Mike Zimmer and Kevin O'Connell. Mike Zimmer overall was a very, very good coaching hire and got the franchise back from the doldrums after where it was with Les Frazier, and went to an NFC championship. So Mike, I think, was a good Vikings coach overall. And I don't know. I mean, with Kevin O'Connell, I was about to say, I'm not sure how much more you could ask. Well, yes, you could ask to win the playoff games. Yes, for sure. That's something. But I don't think they missed the Kevin O'Connell hire. I mean, every other coach except for Todd Bowles from that hiring season is fired already. I think there were 10 and 8 are gone, and Todd Bowles is barely hanging on. So I think that they clearly hit with Kevin O'Connell. It's just they haven't, gotten over the hump. And he was also, at least significantly or somewhat responsible for Sam Darnold leaving and winning the Super Bowl. So there's ups and downs to just about everybody. But I'm not like GM. Yeah, you could say Kwesi was a miss. They end up having some success in that era. But yeah, I mean, the fact that you have to fire him pretty quickly, sure, I'd say that. Overall, the Wilfs spending a metric ton of money on this franchise to provide the best possible situation for players, coaches, everybody else, to give them all the resources to win, and then wanting to win is a hard criticism for me and probably always will be. Even if I think that there are times where they have just not really seen the light in the future of, if you just take a step back now, it's going to be way better for you. David says Vikings, Packers, Bears, and Lions. I think that we will look back and see that this is the first of a number of drafts that we're going to win over the next several years. So, well, you think that the Vikings had the best draft, or should be maybe the best, or is that the order that they should be favored, or you think that it's going to turn out? Either way, I mean, not surprising that we would get the Vikings at the top there on a Viking-centric show. But the thing about the NFC North is that any order that you put in there, you could absolutely justify. If you said, I think Chicago's going to take a big step forward, you could justify that. If you said the Vikings just need good quarterback play and they're going to be at the top, you could justify that. Definitely. Antonio, the Vikings will probably lose one game against the North, probably to Detroit. I believe Kyler will bring the video game aspect to the offense. Clever, Antonio. But they have not had a quarterback like this since when? I mean, Favre was the different kind of swashbuckler, but he was not a running quarterback. He was, going to make plays on the move a little bit, but he was also old, so he was mostly playing for the pocket. Who's the last Viking quarterback who was really a playmaker? It's like Case Keenum, but he was nowhere near as fast as this. So, Trim says they don't make it public because those people might have other jobs. Okay. I don't know. Like, they're not, I would imagine that they need permission from their teams. I don't think that they're doing it in the middle of the night. Son of Beavers, if they're asking other teams to interview. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Purple Kool-Aid, I think the rankings are the Lions. This is a FanDuel question of the day. The Lions, Packers, Bears, and Vikings for now. Draft, I think we won out of the 4. The Lions reached for Miller and Thieneman to be, and yeah, the Bears with Thieneman to be a needle mover must be exceptional. So we had some good picks. Yeah, I don't think that anybody in the North really blows me away with the way that they handled the draft, and the Packers didn't have their first round draft pick. So I can buy that. In terms of the actual order, yeah, the Lions, it's weird because the Lions and the Vikings had the same record last year, but the Lions probably deserve more benefit of the doubt, and clearly in the betting market, they're getting it. They had the best point differential. That's odd. They had a bunch of injuries. They still had a good offense despite their offensive coordinator not knowing what he's doing because they've got that much talent. They feel like they still have the high-end skill players around Jared Goff. That offensive line still scares me, though, or doesn't, terrify me. But if I were them, I would be concerned about the offensive line. They drafted, as you said, a reach at right tackle, and they're going to ask him to start right away. Is that going to work out? I don't know. Packers drafted a kicker. Hey, when the Vikings drafted Will Reichard, I just pointed out that historically speaking, undrafted kickers do better than drafted kickers. Doesn't apply every single time, and it's a 6th round pick. So the Packers drafting a kicker, it's fine. It wasn't like didn't San Francisco draft one in the 3rd? That was absurd. And the guy didn't even work out. Parker would prefer Rob stays on for cap management and think he's valuable to have in the building. And then for general manager, would love to see someone from Philly and poach a Howie disciple. I mean, if you're going to go get somebody from the best team in the league at this, and that is Philadelphia. Leonard, there are plenty of examples of Kevin and Brian misjudging players. Was Blackman evidence of good judgment? There is not a team in the league who has not misjudged a 3rd round draft pick who was like 105th overall. Sometimes I'm like, you guys are reaching. That is a stretch. I mean, with Kevin O'Connell, there's a much easier young player that he misjudged. It's right there. It's right there. If you want to point out a player that Kevin O'Connell misjudged, Mekhi Blackman is really not the one you need to throw the stone at. They haven't given Brian Flores jack for draft capital ever. Since he's been here, nothing. They gave him Dallas Turner and nothing. Back end of the 3rd round players. The fact that Blackman gave them 400 snaps one year and was fine and was probably going to be better if he didn't tear his ACL is like a decent 3rd round pick. I don't know why expectation. Maybe it's because you can Google these guys and draft analysts. They fall in love with certain people that we treat late 3rd round draft picks. People saying, man, this Ty Felton, I can't believe it. It's like, what? Like the 1st and 2nd round draft picks have legitimate odds to be good players. Everyone else is a dice roll. And yet there's some expectations. It seems that there's supposed to be these like star players. Dat Bone says, I want Rob B to be president of football operations, then hire a bright young GM, mix the old school wisdom with modern ideas. It doesn't seem that it doesn't seem. Mark Wilf told me directly when I asked him, is how I should put it, in Florida, that they're not going to have someone who's over the GM. The GM and the coach are going to be at the top, and they're going to answer to ownership. That's how it's going to be. True Lee during the draft was wishful thinking the Vikings would trade with the Jets and the Vikings get a 7th round pick back. I mean, what does a 7th round pick really mean? When were you talking about? I don't know how much opportunity. We always assume that teams just had a chance to trade back. We don't know that they actually did. So they stayed and they picked the guy that they liked the most. Matthew says, thoughts on the Eagles assistant leaving for other opportunities, think he might be an option. It's been reported by multiple people that he's leaving the industry. Not that he's just, I mean, I don't know. Could they talk him out of it? But I'm not sure where it came from that he would be a candidate. He's, at least from my understanding, is like going somewhere else to the finance industry or something, just straight up like leaving football. So that would make him maybe not so much of a candidate, but maybe, I don't know, maybe they could talk him out of it. Antonio, we need someone who has played the game at the highest level and has been in the front office, a football guy, not some kid who's new to all this. Definitely don't need someone who's played the game. If you ever seen Howie Roseman, definitely not Caleb Banks size, put it that way. You don't need to have played the game to be a general manager. It's a management position. It's not a Madden position where you just click and pick players and stuff. It's leading a whole franchise. There's a lot more to it. It can be a former player. Dan Morgan in Carolina, Ozzie Newsome I mentioned, John Lynch. There's former players who run front offices, but it definitely doesn't have to be one. Benjamin, the Wilfs need to learn to get out of the way and just sell the team, or just sell the team. They've yet to put together a competent front office. Rick and Zimmer is the closest they've came. See, this is the hard part because clearly that's not true, that they've never put together, like they've had really good teams over many years as the owners of the franchise, whether it was, Favre going to the NFC Championship or the Rick and Zim, or most recently when Kevin O'Connell has his starting quarterback. They're 31-11 when he has his, starting quarterback, either Kirk Cousins or Sam Darnold. I just think that, I think a lot of the stuff, to just tell you the truth, this is just my feeling, a lot of the stuff from people on the outside with the Wilfs is you just don't really know anything and you're just sort of throwing stuff out there. Like, I think that that's mostly it, because they don't talk a lot. We don't know what their conversations are really like. We don't even really know what their opinions often are like, or how much they're involved in certain things, unless they tell us directly, we were involved with that or we wanted that. One thing that we do know, because Marcus said it numerous times, is that anything less than competing for the playoffs and making the playoffs is a disappointment every single year. And they're always going to fight tooth and nail for that. So whoever gets hired, and I say that both like admiring it and also being frustrated by it at the same time, because that's not how, there's 32 teams. You can't just always win. So there is a little bit of, come on, sometimes you got to live in reality there, but also I appreciate that an ownership is trying to win, because look around the league, there are not 32 serious franchises. There are definitely not 32. So the fact that your team is one of them is a major benefit. And look, there are teams whose own players give their owners Fs when they're asked about their ownership. Look at the Browns. They're going to start Deshaun Watson. I know, like, hey, you're not the Browns is definitely not. It's like a backhanded compliment, but your team trying to win all the time is just not a level that they set that should be so hard that it should crush you under the weight of trying to win, right? Like, it shouldn't be that hard. Like, Seattle is a team that never tanks or whatever. They made the right Russell Wilson move, and that ended up being the thing that tumbled down to Sam Darnold winning the Super Bowl for them and getting a lot of draft capital. So they were good there, and they were willing to take a step back with Geno Smith. They actually thought they were going to take a step back and ended up being competitive. They had a lot of good draft picks. They had a lot of good decisions to get, like DeMarcus Lawrence, trade for Leonard Williams, all that sort of stuff. But that's not a team, Seattle, who has ever said, let's tank and draft the next quarterback number one. So it's not like it's unfathomable to continue winning. San Francisco, no, I shouldn't totally throw San Francisco out there, because they got Nick Bosa through an accidental tank. Super Rod, we got a GM. We need to get a GM that is a great negotiator, and ownership needs to know that we have down years instead of we need to make the playoffs. I agree with that part. Yep, I agree with that part. Morale, any chance that they add an analytics GM after Kwesi? Well, Kwesi always despised the frame of him being the analytics GM. He did have a different background, and it was more on the data side. He also was an assistant GM for another team already, but he had come from the research side of things. I think that they will go with someone much more experienced. If there's a thing to knock Kwesi on, it's not the analytics. It's really the experience. that even if they had said you can hire all your own people, I don't even know if he had his own people, that they might want to go with someone who has much more time in the game, that maybe is not like they were looking for something that was totally the opposite of Rick Spielman vibe, and they got it. And overall, they built a team that had a 14-win season and a 13-win season and won 9 games last year despite bad quarterback play. So it's not like he did horrendously, but what you need is someone who truly understands the value and the application of data, whether it's brought to them from the analytics department or whether it's their own analysis. They need to get it. But here's the reality of the NFL today. Everyone has to be into data. Everyone. If not, you're going to get run out of the building by every other GM who understands how to use it. I mean, we've seen such monumental shifts in data usage in the NFL by coaches, especially, and I think also by front offices. And where it really shows up is in how much they pay for stuff. It's not random that they all decided that a offensive tackle is worth X, and you would see so much different variations of that if the data didn't clearly point to what you should be paying for those things. That's what's driving a lot of stuff, a lot of decisions. They're using NGS for evaluations. They're using PFF data for many years now. I mean, Kwesi, this is a thing. You could be like, oh, Kwesi used his analytics or whatever. Yeah, he used them to help San Francisco in the draft many years ago, which is how he made his bones in the league, was by using PFF data and presenting it to the 49ers organization to help them get an edge when that was first coming out. So if you know that stuff, you know that it doesn't mean they're all going to draft versus a consensus board, but like it does mean you need to understand it and what that can tell you, what that can't tell you, and then every other data thing and how it can be used to your advantage, what you can study that might give you the slightest edge to evaluate a free agent, to understand circumstances better, right? To give out, a smaller contract to somebody who's just as good. The whole Jason Giambi, we need to replace him in the aggregate, like that kind of thing. They actually did that with the defensive line and then didn't realize how well they had done it with Harrison Phillips and Jonathan Bullard and so forth. So, if you don't understand data now, you are at a loss. And Rick used it a lot, by the way. Rick definitely used it a lot. There's a guy named Mike Band who put out an article on Twitter about the 2015 draft where they had developed a draft model and it influenced the 2015 draft for the Vikings when he was working there. So, Rick was into the data as well. He just didn't have the same like fluency with it with Kwesi, but I think he was better at, being a decision maker and kind of being the guy in the room that everybody trusted. So there needs to be a mix of that. Tim says the organization needs to collaborate and develop their plan and align with it. If so, it will show on the field for all to see. If the GM needs to say the buck stops here and if not, the GM needs to say the buck stops here and make hard decisions. Yeah, I agree with that. Like everybody loved the idea of collaboration and then it got messy and then they didn't love the idea of collaboration. But I think that's what you need. And that's what they had in Rick. Like they had a good situation where Rick was clearly the guy and no one questioned. And I talked to Scott Studwell about this one time. No one questioned who was the guy that was making the final call. And it was Rick and they respected that. And when it was Kwesi, it was like, we're not really sure. And if it's Rob, I think that we'll know that. And it's been shown, I think this offseason with the Grenard trade and with the lack of free agent movement that the buck can stop with him. Because otherwise, I think if you gave the coaches a blank check, they would have gone out and spent, whatever they could to win in 2026. So, Remmer, are they notably leaving KOC out of the hiring? Didn't see him mentioned in the note. Well, they don't have to tell you if he is. They said a small group, which again, I'm available. But a small group. I don't know who that includes. I don't know if that includes Kevin O'Connell or not. And you are right to point it out that it didn't say that O'Connell will be involved, but I would have to imagine that my guess is that in the first run, maybe he would not be. And then once they whittle it down to certain candidates, that would be, that's just a guess. that makes logical sense to me. Like, cast the wide net. Don't have Kevin O'Connell, who's trying to put together his mini camp plan or whatever, just going to every single meeting, but then bring him into the process when you've whittled it down. That could be it. Stop treating Paper Tiger 13 and 14 win seasons as if they mean anything. Look, the 13 win season, fair enough. The 14 win season, they outscored their opponents by 100 points. And they had a top 10 offense and defense, right, that year. So stop treating the winning like they won. I mean, if you just want to be that person who thinks everything is horse crap, I just don't know what to tell you. Like, it's my job to lay out everything as objectively as I can. And the wins and losses, they happened and they're a part of it. And so if you have a head coach and a general manager who built a team that was headed to Detroit with a chance to win their 15th game because they built such a good team, then it's pretty hard to say that everyone is just stupid and terrible all the time. But that does seem to be like a thing. It does seem to be a thing. Like, there are certain folks that no matter what happens, it's like, well, they didn't win the Super Bowl, so everything is garbage. I feel like it's my job to sort it out into different little categories and like try to pick it apart. What was it really, right? Like, what's the most fair way to look at it? That's my job. You can be as angry as you want to be. That's your prerogative. But my job is to try to pick it all apart and say, let me look around the entire National Football League. Cause I don't know if this was a response to, the O'Connell point, but like, look around the entire NFL. Look at how often teams are hiring and firing coaches, and do good franchises do that all the time? Do they just sort of like, oh, well, this guy had a down year, like Arizona, those brilliant leaders in Arizona, where it's like, well, the guy had been a good coach for what we had, but they had a down year and we're just going to fire him. Like, we don't know what we're doing, but we're just going to fire him. You don't want that to be the case. You want to have your franchise, if you have a good coach, that you give him plenty of room to grow and to see where it takes you, rather than just saying, well, the next coach will be better. But how often does that even happen? I mean, sometimes you could tell me, yeah, well, they fired this coach and then it worked or whatever, and here or there. And you're probably able to come up with some examples. But I also think that teams like Philadelphia, teams like San Francisco, teams like the Rams have, I think, had success by playing it through some of the hard years. Kyle Shanahan has 2 4-win seasons or something like that, a 6-win season, a 4-win season to his name. Has missed the playoffs several times. You're not firing Kyle Shanahan. And okay, yeah, he did make a Super Bowl and he's won in the playoffs. That's true. And O'Connell needs to get there. He didn't necessarily do that in his first year in San Francisco. That was 2017. Took until 2019 to get there. Sean McVay had a down year and they didn't fire him. Like, I don't know. I think when you have one of the guys who's better at this, you stick with that. And I also think that when we're rewriting the Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah era, you can't just go, well, everything that he did was garbage and was terrible and he stunk and should never be spoken of again, when you had good seasons and you've had 3 winning seasons out of 4 years that he was here. I don't really think that was the reason that he was fired. I think it had a lot to do with the trust of going forward, knowing what's on the horizon. So, I mean, I guess it's just a little bit odd to, oh man. Yeah, a little bit odd to see this many people who are like pissed off, which is just unusual to me because it's like not the time of year where we usually get that. I don't know. It's like I guess I wasn't really prepared for that type of response to like a general manager discussion, but I guess some of you were very angry like 2 days after the draft. Not where I expected you to be. Bryson, I hope Rob doesn't get the job. He'll eventually get fired or forced to step down, and it's the awkwardness I don't want in the building. I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't know. Like, unless it goes right. But I guess the chat is not seeing any chance of that happening today. Mr. Mayor, I feel like the last several years of inefficient trading started to snowball. I don't know if we've had the same offers on the table as other teams drafting around us have had. Could be. You're right about some of the trading, giving up. I mean, one of the problems with being in a mode where you're having a 13 or 14 win season and you feel like you gotta, try to go fill that need in the middle of the season and you move draft capital, or when you're taking your big swing and you want to, hey, let's go get our big time player and take that big cut at it. There was a comparison somebody made. Actually, Kwesi made this on this show one time. He made it about kind of like implied the Timberwolves going to get Rudy Gobert and taking that big swing is sort of similar to when they got Dallas Turner, which is, they overpaid for Gobert. It's worked out really well overall for the Timberwolves. The problem is you can't really justify every big swing as, well, it's worked out that one time. It's like, did this really make sense to do? The Dallas Turner one might make a heck of a lot more sense this year than it has looked like for the last couple of years. But to your point, it's always seemed like they've paid top dollar in trades. And although they did get a sixth or a fifth for Sam Howell. So maybe they won that trade. They won the heck out of the Sam Howell trade. But point being that it did seem like that they had trouble getting over the finish line with trades, and they do need someone who's a little, more connected in the NFL, more respected in the NFL, that maybe that was an issue with Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. I don't know. But you're right. If they couldn't get an offer to move back for number 18 that was significant, then why was that? Maybe it was just because in this draft, nobody really wanted to move up. That probably could be part of it as well. BM says zoned out for a month and came back into the draft without many draft thoughts. Honestly, came away happy overall. And I'm actually high on the season and where they're set up for the future. Well, you're in a different spot than some folks. I'll tell you that. I think that where I'm at with the future in general is they've done a lot to help themselves for the future under Rob Brzezinski this year, regardless of whether he's the GM or not. This offseason did a lot to set them up for 2027 and beyond. And clearly that was on his mind. He was talking about it numerous different times throughout the process. So the fact that they did that is an overall positive. But what I find in general, both, great about the draft and also off-putting about it, is that people decide right after it happened whether it was any good or not. And I just can't get there with you. I can tell you about the risks. I can tell you about concerns that I have about each player. Did you spend the draft capital the right way? Did you manage the board the right way? Did you take players that were too risky? Did you take players that even if they hit their peak might not have as big of an impact as you think they're going to have, or whatever? Like, there's that in different areas of this draft. But there are some folks who seem to have come out of the woodwork after this draft and decided now is the time to burn down TCO Performance Center. And I guess I would just ask maybe to wait till they play a football game again. But the first quarter is a great time of the first game. That's usually when that overreaction starts. But let's see a couple of guys get on the field, and then maybe we could start to assess it after that. So BM, you're in a different spot than a lot of other people. Mr. Mayor, I think that teams feel that they don't need or want to offer us fair market value on trades, because then they'd be the only losers that could fleece us. Well, I mean, in any sort of trade, you're looking for fair value to go back and forth. And a lot of the trades were, I mean, they traded for Cam Robinson. Trading back, that was a controversial one in 2022. I didn't think that they got enough value for that. Some charts liked it. Some charts didn't. I think common sense there. If you're moving back 20 spots out of the top 15, you got to really, really get, something big for that. You definitely do. And they didn't, and it didn't end up working out. Palm Tree Yeti. Do we have a read on if Brzezinski wants the job? Job security for being a cap guy seems pretty alluring. Tom Pelissero reported that he does, that his hat is in the ring. And he's probably decided, look, I've worked for this team for long enough, And I just had a good time being the GM and everybody seemed to be happy. So why not, right? Why not take the shot at it? You're probably not going to get another shot, maybe ever. So take that one shot. I agree. Now this is where we agree, Dirty Mike. Analytics is great if they actually followed it. That's true. That is true. Guitar, ICU maybe. Spielman did not draft a guy who couldn't throw in the second round. That was actually the third round. That was actually the third round. If you're talking about Kellen Mond. But yeah, the Ponder thing also. Yeah, Kellen Mond. That was the third round. Yep. CJ, you're right. Philadelphia did pass over Jefferson. And that's why when people bring up like Ty Felton hasn't done enough for Mekhi Blackman, it's like, okay, even the best teams make mistakes. But I think we also agree that Philadelphia has done the best job of building a roster of any team in the NFL. Probably hands down. But everyone's going to make a mistake. Yep. Of course. I mean, it's like, that's why it's weird where, you know, these grudges end up getting built up for every single mistake. It's like, it's really about having as many swings as you could possibly get. Yes, Philadelphia made that mistake. The next receiver they got became a superstar because they had another swing at it, because they did things to set themselves up to have that. Steven, my ideal GM would be Bill Belichick, the GM, not Bill Belichick, the drafter. He put the best team available, but not always the best players, never overpaid for players. Yeah, you mean so like not the current Bill Belichick, who I guess his girlfriend would be the GM, but you mean like the way that Bill Belichick makes the Jonathan Grenard trade, right? That's what you're getting at, I think, is that Bill Belichick would do stuff like this guy we're moving on from before he falls off, or if he's too expensive, or if we can replace him. And Belichick struggled with drafting. Do you ever wonder why? Because they drafted 32nd all the time. That's why he struggled at drafting, I think, was that but they were really good at identifying Patriot players. And I think that Flores is good at that. Proctor, they should have never let George Payton leave the building. I have a lot of respect for George. I think he's done a very good job of managing the Sean Payton relationship. And the next GM might have a similar thing where they might decide they want KOC to largely dictate what happens there. And the GM is supposed to work with him. That's where George is at. But also, yeah, you're right. The Belichick looked like a good GM. It wasn't, it was because of Tom Brady, and it probably was because they were stealing other people's game plans and stuff, but it was also on the defensive side. That's where you could see Belichick and some of his mastery of team building was on the defensive side. He understood exactly what he needed, how much it cost, how to get it, who needed to stay, who needed to go. The Tom Brady part is why he's a genius, but I mean, still. Brent, good or bad contract for Jawan Jennings? 3 years, $45 million with 30 guaranteed. That's a lot for me. That would be 30 guaranteed is a ton for me. I would probably go maybe more like, well, if you can get him for multiple years, I think that's a lot. I mean, it is $15 million a year, but is there another team that's giving him out that much? I'm looking at that guaranteed money and saying that's a ton for me. But essentially, if it's 30 million guaranteed, well, Brent, that's not as bad as I initially thought, because if you think about the price for receivers, 3 years, it's essentially a 2-year, $30 million deal, which is about $15 million per year. Actually, you know what, Brent, you're not bad at this. That's not too bad. But would he sign up for 3 years? Because I think he's much more along the lines of try to sign up for a year and then look for a bigger contract down the road if no one's willing to give it to him, because a lot of the money is already spent at this point around the NFL. That's not bad though. I don't mind that. Let's see. Mama, everyone in the chat is an expert level GM. Yeah, I mean, look, football wouldn't be anywhere near as fun if we didn't have strong opinions on it. But sometimes it like clears it goes over. It goes a little bit over for me. I think having strong opinions on football is why it's so fun to talk about. But sometimes it goes a little bit too far. BM says, kind of surprised about how much negativity there is about the draft, perfectly fine with them betting on a player with huge upside instead of getting a homeless man's Harrison Smith. I don't think that Dylan Thieneman is a homeless man's Harrison Smith. I think he's just not Harrison Smith's position. I just don't think he plays Harrison Smith's position. Harrison is a huge guy. He is, I know him. He is big. He is 6'2", 200, 15, 20 pounds. Like Dylan Thieneman's like 5'11" and 200. They're just totally different players. I really feel like it was just the white safety, guy wears an armband thing. Well, he did play all over the Oregon defense, but that doesn't mean you're doing it in the NFL. That's another thing that people need to kind of like get their mind around is there's versatility in college and there's versatility in the NFL. I don't know that a 5'11.5" or whatever he was, 200-pound guy is playing up in the box too much in the NFL unless you are a special type of player. But even that's even a concern of mine with Downs, and Caleb Downs didn't go as high as people thought, I think because of that. Neb, I think this draft was a bit of take your medicine affair, especially for the fans and media. Nothing sexy, nothing exciting, just good, decent meat and potatoes, depth at lunch pail positions. Now, I would agree with that. They just didn't get, it's not even like the sexiness, it's that they didn't get the things that they kind of obviously needed, like a future center or a wide receiver, and that likely played into some of the feeling. And I do also think that some people in the draft universe, when you stretch on the first round pick, it doesn't really matter what you do the rest of the draft. Even if you do have a solid rest of the draft, the first round pick is going to be weighed in those grades so heavily. Purple Sam Squanch says KOC has had 8 starting quarterbacks with the Vikings. He needs a stable QB1. A lot of that comes down to it. A lot of whether you're a genius in the NFL or not comes down to whether you have the quarterback position. And if you get it locked in, then you can really effectively focus on the rest of your roster as opposed to always worrying about what's going to happen next at quarterback. Tyson says, seems like a good chance the grade in 3 years will either be a C or A, mostly depending on Banks. Right. I think that the other guys are pretty easy to be able to say what they're going to be. Like, and there's no sure things at all, but you can project certain guys of like, I think Damon Claiborne, for example, like you could kind of project what that looks like. Max Bredesen, you could project what a fullback's going to look like. Jake Golday, it's a pretty clear path. Banks, it's just not as clear. I didn't say that Verse was not better than Dallas Turner right now. They're on 2 different timelines is what I said. Caleb says, if Rob doesn't get the job, would he be upset and leave the Vikings altogether? I don't know. I can't speak for him. I am not sure, but I think it's very possible that he could decide to do something else, but I doubt it. I mean, I don't know. I'm not in his head. I think that he'll probably just continue to be a part of the front office. He has a very good job and he's very good at his job. And any GM who comes in would love to have that guy unless they have their own. So it might depend on that. Learn to swimify. Watching tape of Kyler Murray juke Jared Verse out of his cleats will cleanse you of any misplaced hype over Verse. Verse is a really good player. What is weird to me a little bit is that I think that he has, am I wrong about that? He has like 12 sacks in his career so far. And it's like, he's sort of treated as if they gave up Will Anderson. And that's not a disrespect. I think Verse is a powerful player. I don't know that he was what they were looking for. And this might be a fit thing. And I also don't know that he was what they were looking for in terms of age, because they had Grenard, they had Van Ginkel, so they wanted to maybe develop a little more. And drafting guys who are 24, there is limited ceilings there a lot of times. Jeffrey says Vikings go top 4 of top 75 consensus board prospects and a handful of scheme fits. Not sure the hand wringing. I think it's really more about Banks. And some people didn't like Jacoby Thomas, but that's a back end of the 3rd round pick. I just can't get too worked up over that. But there were some people who just hated that draft pick and killed them for it. I don't know what to say about that. That's like, if Flores likes a back end of the third round safety, then just take the back end of the third round safety. I'm not too concerned if, anybody in the outside world had him as a fourth round pick instead of a third, which the Vikings didn't have a fourth round pick. So you kind of had to do it. All the other picks, you're right. They matched up with consensus or were steals or whatever. And especially Damon Claiborne, there were some analysts who had him in the top 10 running backs in the class. It's really about Banks. I think that's what it comes down to, is that nobody had Banks that high at the point of the draft. They apparently did before. And I believe there was one person who mocked him to the Vikings. Was it Chad Reuter who may have mocked Caleb Banks to the Vikings way back when, like when we were first starting early out? But not at the end of the process. So they were going to get pretty well crushed for that. But the rest of the guys were drafted where they were expected to be taken. They just didn't take the positions that they expected. Jay, what change would you do if I was the general manager? Well, see, that's a hard one, because if you're talking about like, how would I build a team in front of my computer with just me doing the draft and everything else, those are two different things from being the general manager. That means like managing an entire coaching staff and front office and scouting department and everything else like that. That's way more to that job than just being like, boop, I pick a player. I mean, I think that you guys have a good sense for the way I think about this stuff. Stockpiling draft capital would be a very huge priority. Having realistic timelines, not being afraid to have seasons that were not ideal, but got you draft capital into the future. And the quarterback decision would be really hard and would determine success or failure for anyone, but really leaning into those positions in the draft that are the most valuable, which they, did with defensive tackle. That's one of the more valuable positions in the league, but leaning on those would be really important. And I mean, being as modern as we possibly could be. And that doesn't mean ignoring the other stuff, but like everything is data points. It's not just stuff you scrape from a box score is the analytics. It's also all your years of scouting are data points too. So I would want to understand what we got right, what we got wrong, how we could become more accurate in the draft would probably be the number one thing, how to stockpile draft capital and how to become more accurate. How can we be 10% more accurate than the rest of the NFL on the draft? What are the things that would point us to that success? And then I think that free agency has a dozen guys every year that just sort of are under the radar and someone grabs them for almost nothing. And it's great. Isaiah Rodgers was that guy last year. How can we get all of them? That would be also my thought process too. But look, it's not like this team has done a gazillion things wrong. And I have 57. Who was the guy? I'm a bad history major who put the list of grievances on the door or whatever. It's a historical theological reference that I'm just, if my wife is listening, she's mad. But anyway, so you know what I'm saying? Like that's not what I would do with this franchise. I wouldn't have this super long list of you have to do this, and this different. It would be just a sharper focus and not being afraid to build on a true timeline and stick to it and not have a little bit of a blip of success and then be like, timeline out the window. Here we go. But that's a lot harder than it seems. It certainly is. Do you think that swing tackle was a bigger need than center with our injury history? Seems like the team did. I got the sense that they must have just not loved the centers that were there when they were on the board. Now, maybe they loved Logan Jones. Maybe they loved Jake Slaughter, but those guys didn't end up being available to them. So it was really Sam Hecht who they could have taken. They decided not to. That must be about the player more than anything. And it might also be about the future with Tiernan, that they might view Tiernan as a future tackle or someone who can kick inside to guard. And they might be sort of safeguarding themselves at those two positions because both of them could be open after this year. And they might also just like what they see from Blake Brandel. It seems like a little risky to me to go into this with Brandel and then two young guys who have never played. That feels like that's got some risk to it for sure. But that's the only thing I could guess, is that they just didn't believe in the centers in this draft. Oh, that's funny. You could just, you don't have to watch it on 2 times speed to catch up. You could just keep rolling until I'm done. Oh, to be up in the chat, but I'm always way behind the chat anyway. So, anyway, Beaver says the Eric Johnson signing seems to be a short-term fix to give Caleb Banks time. That way they don't have to rush him back from his foot injury. Yeah, sure. I mean, in practice, and then maybe he ends up going out there a little bit. He's played, but it just hasn't been very good. So I don't know if it's anything more than just like a deep depth guy for training camp, because you need veteran players. And then, hey, maybe if there's something there more than that they like, they can find a role for it. Flores has been able to do that before. So that's the best I could do with that signing. I don't know that it's directly connected to Caleb Banks, just because this guy, I mean, he's maxed out at like 400 snaps in his career, unless they really see something. AZ bro, love how long the pods are. Well, I keep getting questions, so I keep giving answers. I enjoy it. BM, we now have a college player going to gambling rehab. How long before we get an NFL player doing the same? That's something that I don't even know. I don't know what you do about that. They just have to have, the guardrails feels like the word we've used a lot, but like, I think you have to have, for players specifically, maybe a lot more attention on that for them. Usually there's at least some signs of things like this. What was happening with Sorsby. It's a concerning situation. It is. And it's not just that, but like also what's happened with the NBA. And what, isn't Damon Jones, he's probably going to go to jail, and he was given inside information and stuff. It does feel like a matter of time before a controversy like that hits the NFL. I definitely agree with you. But the FanDuel question of the day, I do need your answer. Oh man, it's what do you do there? I think that you really have to work with the athletes. I do think you have to work with the athletes a lot more in their education than they maybe do, and you have to let them know to seek resources a lot earlier. In terms of the FanDuel question of the day, no avoiding it, that connection, but responsible, everyone. Neb says Bears, Lions, Vikings, Packers for how the division will play out. That was the FanDuel question of the day, is that the Vikings are plus 600 now after the draft to win the division. So how do we think it's going to play out now that we have basically the full rosters? Bears, Lions, Packers, Vikings is how Neb's got it. I think that that's fair to have the most skepticism around the Vikings because we just don't know what Kyler Murray's going to look like. But the Bears are kind of the regression candidate, not if Caleb Williams is good. It's hard to figure. The Lions are the team that might be most likely to hit that wall and fall off. That last year, that was it, that they had sort of run out of steam. Their offensive line not good enough, and the Bears are the ascending team. But any combination, honestly, it makes sense. Need to keep Reichert at all costs. Definitely. Learn to swimify until proven otherwise. Can't take the Lions seriously. Never forget how they couldn't beat Max Brosmer. Fair enough. Yeah, they did finish last. Jason says, on your last episode, you were searching for a comp for Caleb Banks and his size, weight, movement skill. Got one for you. Albert Hainsworth, 6'6", 320, 509 40 time. That is the first half of Albert Hainsworth. That would be the holy cow, I can't believe they pulled this off. That's the 99th percentile if he were to become Albert Hainsworth. Albert Hainsworth is similarly those huge hands, the power. Yeah, like that is a great best case scenario. I came up with Daquan Jones as a like 75th percentile scenario. Skull Shadow, 6-11 is the floor, 10-7 the ceiling. Jerry says, to borrow a quote from politics, it's the QB, stupid, get that right. And a lot of the problems don't seem as bad. Don't disagree with that. Fire everyone. The 7th round pick wasn't a first year All-Pro. Yeah. Chris Carter could be a good GM. I don't know about that. Thantos Marathon, the Thielen trade and the Banks pick make me worry about Rob Brzezinski. He's respected and knows how to manage the cap, though. The Thielen trade was, I think that was had some layers to it that makes it more complicated. Just maybe put it that way. I don't know. Steven says, are you saying football is a numbers game? Oh, is that a book that someone read? Joker, it's hard to argue against the probability outcomes based on history. Don't use the data at your own peril. Yeah. In football, so much rests on the quarterback that you could be the best analytical team in the NFL and lose. You could be the worst and you can win. I mean, I'm not sure how brilliant the Chiefs have been using data or whatever. They've had Patrick Mahomes. They might have to be a little more brilliant going forward. Clearly, the Bills are trolling their entire fan base and media by not drafting wide receivers, which seems like a bad idea for Josh Allen. But they've won a lot of football games because Josh Allen. But I think that if you want to be in the NFC where it's pretty wide open at the quarterback position, that there's a lot of teams with B or B plus quarterbacks, who's got the slightest edges on team building, that's who's going to win. So, yeah, I mean, Jeff, what are my thoughts on bringing in Terrence Gray for an interview? I don't know if I have specific thoughts on anybody. I just don't know how to do it. I don't know. Like if you tell me, well, what about this guy from this team? I don't know. Like, it's not like a coach where we can look at a scheme and a system and everything. We could just say this person worked for this team and that worked. But there's a lot of people who've worked for certain teams and then been terrible GMs elsewhere or the other way around. So I don't know. Anyway, Dat Bones says organizational stability over the years is key. Then decisions aren't based on job security. Totally agree. That's a great point. That you want to make sure that you have people not trying to play for their jobs, draft for their jobs. And it doesn't seem like that happened this year. Son of Beavers, I would like a scouting department overhaul. Also, is Grigson still with the team? So far as I know, but usually contracts come up in May in the NFL, so we'll see if that continues. Dat Bone, draft-wise, we need to improve in the area of managing the board. Could have had some of their targets later and added draft capital. I mean, you think that they could have. I mean, that it's based on a guess versus the consensus of whether they could have or not. We need to keep that in mind, that it's not an absolute fact that you could have had this player there or that player there or whatever. It's just your thought that maybe based on the expectation they could have. Now, if you wanted to say, well, if the expectation is that that player should have been available, if they're not, let somebody else reach, and then I can get on board to some extent with that. To me, day 3 is whatever you like, just go for it. Just swing at players you like their personality, like their athleticism, whatever it is. It is so random past day 2 that I don't even know. Get a fullback. He's got a pretty good chance of doing something for you. Maybe there were some receivers I liked still in the 4th round. I liked Skylar Bell, but if one of them turns out to be a star, then yeah, okay. Maybe some of that stuff doesn't look great of taking Jacoby Thomas, but there's just as good of a chance that a 3rd round safety could become a contributor for you. I don't know. How much do you think a cap guy makes? I have no idea. Dano, are you surprised that Mac Jones is still in San Francisco? Not from what I heard. I heard that they wanted to keep him and that they were asking for the moon for Mac Jones, and no one was willing to give up the moon for Mac Jones. No one is doubting that Jared Verse is good. No one's doubting that. Yep. It was Martin Luther. Okay. Yeah. That was the grievances. I knew it was somebody. or it was George Costanza and Festivus. Both of those answers are correct. All right. Well, we've closed in on almost 10 o'clock. So this is, we've been far past the line where we get loopy on the show. I did promise, though, that I would look at some undrafted free agents. So I might as well just do that now before I hang it up for the night, because I got something planned for tomorrow night for you guys. I won't ruin it, but should be good. So let me just run through the UDFAs that caught my eye. I've got 4 of them, and then also just add the punter in your mind, because that's always going to be interesting. So I'm going to run through these, give you my 4 most interesting UDFAs, and we could circle back to them. Rookie minicamp is always hard. It's one day, they're not in pads. It's not as intense as it was for Zimmer, where he wanted everybody out there going 110%. I think it's harder to have a big takeaway, but these guys will be guys that we keep an eye on through OTA's minicamp. The first one on my list was Dylan Bell, who is from Georgia, undrafted free agent, obviously, had 27 catches, 279 yards, and 2 touchdowns in 2025. But had 120 career receptions. He's a very experienced player. And even though he didn't have the fastest 40, he was still 9th best by NFL Next Gen in terms of his athleticism score. So burst is there. And what you could see is, we talk about this a lot of the players, hey, just get the ball in their hands, natural athleticism, strength, breaking tackles, playmaking. I see a lot of that from Dylan Bell from Georgia. And I will say that I was on the same page as Steve Smith when he did his breakdown of Dylan Bell and really liked him, that Steve Smith was offended by Georgia's offense. And when I was watching Zachariah Branch thinking the Vikings might draft a wide receiver, silly me, I was like, what is this? What is this offense? It was just bubbles and screens and reverses. And, Bell was actually better when he had Carson Beck there, and Beck more of a real quarterback. So he's a guy to watch, just the playmaking skill, and the wide receiver position should be pretty darn wide open past, well, we'll see if they sign Jawan Jennings, but at least past the top 2, maybe past the top 3. UDFA number 2, Kajon Owens. He went to Florida International University, is kind of a 1-year breakout player. 1,300 yards, 6.3 yards per carry. He is not the fastest guy, but he has great vision, cutbacks, kind of a bowling ball, hard to take down, and a ton of missed tackles, tons of yards after carry. I think 4 of his 6.3 yards per carry was after contact this year, which is pretty interesting. And it's another room where you've got Xavier Scott, but you could make it as something. You could make it as practice squad. You could make a name for yourself. He's not much of a receiving back, though, which makes me wonder, can he pass protect? Can he play special teams? But at least in terms of his numbers for this year and his performance at a little bit different, competition, pretty dominant, though. So he's going to be someone that I'll keep an eye on in a room that doesn't have that many bodies. UDFA number 3, this guy is very interesting. Cameron Stewart, who went to Temple, 6'4", 244 pounds, and he only rushed the passer this year 139 times and had 39 quarterback pressures, ran a 4.56 at the NFL Combine, or no, at maybe his pro day, and 34-inch arms. This guy did not play almost at all for his college career, and then finally gets his opportunity this year and lights it up as a pass rusher. So not very experienced, but kind of intriguing, just with the measurables and then this production kind of out of nowhere. So Cameron Stewart, and the edge position, another one that's very wide open for this team. And the 4th one on my list is Jacob Thomas, not to be mistaken with Jacoby Thomas. 5 interceptions over the last 2 years, ton of football in his career, and ran a 4.4 40, again at a position that should have a lot of competition. So a playmaker there. Went to James Madison, not a huge university, but James Madison was really darn good as a football team, and he was one of their best players. So those are my 4 most intriguing UDFAs to keep an eye on. But they brought in like 19, so we'll see if anybody else ends up emerging. Anyway, well, thanks for the great chat tonight. Very interesting to get all of your thoughts on the GM, the bigger kind of picture for this team. And I've got something cooked up for you for tomorrow. Good conversation coming your way. And we'll see what else may come about. We'll see if there's a surprising wide receiver signing or anybody else added to the roster or any other news items for, I don't know, like another podcast. But my plan is, and this doesn't often work out in Vikings land, my plan was, because it was a long weekend, to actually take a Friday and not do anything. But sometimes I just get ideas and need to do a podcast anyway, so we'll see. Anyway, thanks for the chat tonight, and we'll catch you all very soon.